Hey, Nathan Baird from cleveland.com here with another Buckeye Talk rapid reaction to the NFL draft. Doug is smoking a pretzel stick, it appears. That's Doug Lesmerises, Stephen Means, also on your screen. And, we mocked the Ohio State players where they'd get drafted this week, and we were exactly right about where the first two linebackers would be taken, more or less. We were just wrong about their identities. We had Baron Browning being taken kind of late in the first round or second round, where Pete Werner was taken, and we had Pete Werner dropping towards the end of the third, early fourth round, and that's where Baron Browning went. He went with the final pick of the third round, 105th overall to the Denver Broncos. He's been an intriguing draft prospect kind of his whole career, more of an intriguing draft prospect sometimes than an actual Ohio State football player, and I don't know whose fault that was, whether it's partially his, partially the coaching, partially just the fit and the way that things went. But this is a kind of defense that I think he especially is intriguing in, a 3-4 defense like what the Broncos run, and the myriad ways that you could find a way to use someone of his talents. He's played inside, he's played outside off the ball. They've used him as an edge rusher. I think there's a lot of ways, Doug, that someone like someone like Baron Browning can help a defense like Denver's.
So I'm looking at a tweet from Next Gen Stats, and they said that Baron Browning scored a 99 in athleticism in their model based on what he tested. And the only other linebacker who scored a 99 this year, that's the highest, is Jamin Davis from Kentucky, who went in the first round. Zaven Collins, who went in the first round, was a 94. Micah Parsons, who went in the first round, was an 83. Pete Werner, who went in the second round, was an 82. On the Pete Werner video, we talked about that Werner's numbers were similar to Baron Browning, but Baron Browning's were better. Baron Browning is athletically as good as any linebacker in this draft, which is why I still think it's a little weird that he fell to 105. People can go on our YouTube channel and find all these videos. Trey Sermon is basically a lot of athleticism, not consistent production. Baron Browning to me is like the Trey Sermon of linebackers, except Baron Browning had much more long-term production than Trey Sermon did. But I still think they have like an athletic upside. So there, the running back went high. Pete Werner is a good athlete, but he's a little more production than Baron Browning. And by this scale that we just went by, not quite the athlete. And there, the production went higher, right? So it's like, I don't know what the league is doing, right? Why? Like Baron Browning, I think could do everything you want him to do. He played for 4 years at Ohio State. Trey Sermon played 2 games. Trey Sermon goes ahead when Baron Browning can like rush the passer. You watch the breakdown on TV and everybody's saying all the same stuff we said for 3 years with Baron Browning. It's like, don't put him in the middle, get him out on the edge, let him rush the passer, let him roam. And it's like, it took Ohio State too long to figure that out. I think he'll be better than in this draft spot. I just think he'll be really productive for them.
Yeah, the problem is, you're right. Baron Browning was developed to be able to do everything, but they never. Ohio State. I'm loving this, by the way. This is how you know it's midnight and it's been a long day. They developed Baron Browning to be able to do everything, but never once really allowed him to do the one thing that he was a 5-star at. And because of that, and along with Bill Davis being his coach for 2 years, the result is a guy who was once the 11th best player in the country and the number 1 outside linebacker in his class is the 105th player taken in an NFL draft 4 years later, when there's plenty of linebackers who have gone before him. That's the result. And I'm still, I don't hate the fit here either, just because, I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to be the next Von Miller. That would be stupid of me to say. But who better for him to learn from than a guy who can do at the most highest possible level you can do it at everything that we think Baron Browning can do as a former 5-star recruit.
I mean, I don't think he's going to be he's not just going to be an edge rusher, though. He is going to play linebacker.
No, he won't. But, I'm just saying.
You thought he was going to be the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year last year. So I'll take your Baron Browning opinions with a grain of salt.
I also said that when he told us he was playing Will linebacker, and not 4 months later when it's like, oh no, never mind, I'm playing Sam.
It is a little bit of a danger zone because the Browns took a guy in Jannard Avery who was sort of like an outside linebacker, sort of like a pass rusher, and he got caught in between and was neither. He was a 5th-round pick. They ended up trading him to the Eagles. I do think, to your point, Steven, if Ohio State never figured him out, Denver better figure out what they want him to do. Because if they ask him for the next 3 years to do a little bit of everything, I'm worried he'll end up doing a lot of nothing. And so I do think versatility is good unless it never finds you a job. I mean, they have Bradley Chubb and Von Miller. I think he'll be on the field doing linebacker things. I don't think he'll be an edge rusher, but I think he can do edge rusher things at times. But I don't know. Maybe you're right. I don't know. I think the edge rusher stuff is a plus for him. I don't think it's going to be the main thing, though, because he can cover. He can do linebacker things. He can run and hit. And he can tackle running back. So it's another one to watch. I mean, like, I'm fascinated by Werner and Browning, how this all shakes down. Because now the one thing in people, we talk a lot about, like, that we thought Baird and Browning kind of got caught in between by the coaching change. Pete Werner had the same coaching change and produced for 3 years. It didn't affect him. Pete Werner thrived. Pete Werner found a way to thrive. So that is a head-to-head comparison here that Werner sort of was more productive.
I mean, I sat down with Baird Browning 2 years ago and we talked about that coaching change, and he talked about how he didn't feel like he had, he felt very insecure. He felt very just kind of lost a little bit his first years at Ohio State, because I don't think he felt like he had that trust with the coaching staff at the time. But he also said, I didn't handle that the right way. It was a bad situation, but the way I chose to handle it affected how it affected me on the field. Like, the results that you saw on the field, I made that worse. I exasperated that. So that's something I think that he learned from. But I also think that it is a trait that you don't see. Like you said, Pete Werner didn't really. There are guys on his team that wasn't true of. The guys who persevered better through things, and maybe that's something that comes through in interviews and comes through in the studies that these teams do, the vetting these teams do of guys. I don't know, but I've long thought, like, as we were just saying, that if I don't think they're going to use him as like a stand-up edge guy who just pass rushes. No, but I think this kind of defense allows him to be versatile in the most Baron Browning way. And we've said that for a long time, right? The best defensive fit for Baron Browning eventually was going to be a team that could just let him be Baron Browning. This year was maybe the closest we saw to that, although they didn't really use him as a pass rusher that much. He had the big strip sack against Mac Jones in the national championship game, but they did not bring him off the edge that much. He was mostly, covering tight ends and then running downhill to make some stops outside. But he's good at that because you get him out in the open. He can make those open field tackles because he legitimately is as fast as his numbers say he is. I mean, he can close on guys pretty quick. He's such an intriguing talent, but it's still a talent that I think, as much as I think the upside could be greater than what he showed at Ohio State, I could see him getting lost in the shuffle because, to me, in the back of my mind, there's also sort of a reason. I don't think it's Ohio State's usage that also maybe didn't get the most out of him. I think there's something more Baron Browning could have done to gotten more out of his career too.
Yeah, I do. I respect the maturity in the answer that I also probably didn't handle that the right way. Because let's just be honest here. He committed to Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell just wasn't here because he was at Cincinnati by the time Baron got here. And then Bill Davis is Bill Davis, and then Bill Davis leaves, and now he's got to build a whole new relationship with Al Washington, and you're asking a 19-year-old to handle that. And he probably did handle it the right way, but the whole point of being Baron Browning, they didn't do that enough at Ohio State. They did it in big games and random moments. I think they did it in the Michigan State game in 2019 where they brought him off the edge on the same side as Chase, and then they did it again against Clemson because they knew that Chase was going to get a lot of attention so they could get away with it. And then obviously they did it a couple of times during the season in 2020 and then really did it against Alabama. But I just think in an NFL scheme where it is a 3-4, and yes, there's a versatility for him to do a lot of those other things, there is still some opening for him to just be Baron Browning at times if Denver wants him to do that.
They never asked Pete Werner to play middle linebacker. They played Baron Browning at middle linebacker for 2 years, and it was never a fit. Right. And it stunted his development. So, I mean, I don't know that either of them are middle linebackers, but like somebody had to be. I actually, like, in hindsight, it's like I think Pete Werner might be more of a middle linebacker than Baron Browning was, especially once his neck grew. So whatever. I mean, like, Nathan, to your point, if you're saying like it wasn't only Ohio State's misuse that slowed him down, I think it's mostly Ohio State's misuse. Like, I think it is
80-20.
I think if like Luke Fickell had been his coach for 4 years, I think he would have been an all Big Ten player and he would have got drafted higher. So, like, what does that mean? Of course, yes, there's some personal responsibility, but there's also not a whole lot of dudes who go through 3 position coaches in their
Fair.
room in 4 years. So, and
Fair.
that one of them is not good enough. I mean, that's, what if you threw the Bill Davis of receivers coaches in that receivers room right now? What would happen? It's like coaching matters. So
we've seen it in 2 rooms on the defensive side. We saw it with the linebackers and we saw it with the secondary, and we're seeing what the 5-star dealt with. Tariq Johnson is just not a part of the defense at all, and Baron Browning is the number 105 pick instead of maybe, I don't know, the 42nd pick.
I will say, I think if Baron Browning has an NFL career and this works out for him, I think Al Washington gets some credit. I mean, he's talked about how important it was that Al Washington showed up, and then the connection that they made, which was like a deep personal connection that goes deep with Al Washington's family. That has been an important thing to kind of get Baron Browning. Because now, I mean, just imagine like if that doesn't happen, maybe Baron Browning doesn't end his career at Ohio State. Maybe he goes back to Texas. Maybe he tries to go to Alabama, and he's got to sit out a year, and then things get really thrown off course. Here he gets to, finish his career on time and move on to the NFL. And like we say, we think that there's some unrealized upside here, and it could be a very good value for the Broncos with the final pick of the 3rd round. We'll be back on Saturday with more of these. Every time an Ohio State player gets picked, guys still on the board: Sean Wade, Tommy Togiai, Jonathan Cooper, Justin Hilliard, a couple other, some specialists and some other people who are probably looking at undrafted free agent situations. So a lot of picks to come still on Saturday's final day of the NFL draft. I'm Nathan Baird for Doug Lesmerises, for Stephen Means. That was Buckeye Talk.